Today I'm talking to Divya Venn, who grew up in the South Bay in California and now spends her time indie hacking, posting online, and writing whatever is on her mind. So, no growth hacks, no fake persona, just an open journal that has a lot of great thoughts put together. So, today we got into what it's like growing up interested in social media and human nature and how to keep your sanity. So, it's a great conversation, very real. And I hope you enjoy this amazing episode of Indian American Stories with Divya Venn. Thank you so much again for coming on. I guess to start things off, could you tell me more about where you grew up, what you do now, what keeps you busy, and like the most exciting thing about the work you do?
Interesting. Okay, so I grew up in the South Bay around Sunnyvale. What I'm doing right now is I'm doing content creation and I'm indie hacking. So basically just kind of toying around with building software and either selling it or trying to get users for it or monetize it in some way. And probably I think the most exciting thing about it is genuinely the people that it helps me run into. I really enjoy, I think one of the biggest things about content creation that I think makes it a very smart move for people to do is that it has a way of bringing people who are aligned to you to your door very organically without, in a way that I think no amount of being very social in real life can do. And yeah, I think I've met a lot of very cool people, a lot of very inspirational people, and it makes me very excited, I think, to wake up every day and just, I don't know, do cool things.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree with you on that. Like content creation, like bringing people together who have a similar niche or interest as you. What are the types of things you talk about on social media, and how do you use your platform to, I guess, forward the things you care about?
I think if there's any theme of my social media, it's probably going to be just things I honestly use Twitter in particular like just open journal. I anytime I have something on my mind, I just write a thread about it. And interestingly enough, there was a time when I was trying very deliberately to grow on Twitter because it was a platform that I wanted to monetize very specifically. And I think actually when I stopped trying to grow and I just went, I kind of realized that Twitter is a pretty low leverage platform. Growth is not, it's not ideal for just growing as big an audience as you want. It's really good for kind of making friends, I'd say. Not so much for gathering large numbers of fans or or for selling things or doing whatever you might want to do with it. So I stopped trying to grow. And then when I stopped trying to grow, I think I started growing very quickly to the point where people were messaging me being like, "Oh, what's your secret?" And I was like, "I have no idea." And I still don't, but I think I do pretty well. And yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, no, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess I'm very excited to speak with you because I often don't get the chance to have these types of conversations with Indian Americans who've grown up in the age and like the rise of social media. I normally talk to parents of kids or like people who are kind of like at later stages in their life. So I guess could you tell me more about like your childhood and growing up as an Indian American in like the 2000s, 2010s era?
I don't feel like growing up Indian American made a significant difference. I think that my experience, I will say that I feel a lot of solidarity to immigrants in general. I think there is something about kind of having your foot between two cultures that gives you the luxury of sort of cherry picking what you like from both and also giving you a perspective that most people don't have. But I think that in general, I've found what I find I feel a lot of kinship with even with like Asian Americans or like Nigerian Americans, right? I think there's a lot of similarities there, but I think my childhood was much more influenced by the specific individuals in it necessarily than being Indian. I will say that I'm sure you're familiar with it. I guess the emphasis on just education and doing well was very strong, but I think it was less strong in my circumstances than it might have been for a lot of people. My mother in particular was not particularly either judgmental or she didn't push me much. I had a lot of freedom. I had a lot of sort of ability to just kind of exist and do as I liked. Yeah, to the point where I even wish that maybe she pushed I wish that she had pushed me some more. And but yeah,
Just I guess just maybe we can be more specific. Like, did your parents know about like your content creation and like your interest in social
oh,
media as a
I
child?
think they found out inevitably at some point, but no, not really. I honestly, it's not the kind of thing I expect most people to understand, just because it's one of those interesting things where when you start out, everyone thinks you're being silly. But then when you start to see some measure of success, they start to think, oh wow, this is smart actually. So now that I make some money from it, not nearly enough to support myself, unfortunately, but some money, and I can point to specific things that content has done for me, I think they're more supportive. But I mostly just kind of pegged away at it on my own. And yeah, yes, very much
I guess
so.
like I've seen a lot of your work. It's really cool. I guess you talk about a lot of different things. So sometimes it's just like advice and stuff for life, and then like sometimes you talk about like, psychology, relationships, etc. And then you also have a lot of tech work and
Mhm.
projects. So I guess do these things just come up in your head and then you feel like writing them down, or do you kind of like plan it out?
No, pretty much. They just come up in my head and I feel like writing them down. My brain is very all over the place. And I've always found writing to be the most wonderful outlet. To the point where I think probably the reason I tweet as much as I do is just because it's something I would do for free. I get a tremendous value out of it. So just for keeping my thoughts organized. And the way I like to put it is that the inside of my head at any point feels like an absolute cacophony of things just kind of rampaging around. And when I write something, I get to just like take it out and package it up neatly and organize it and put it down, and then I have the free room to think about something else. So that's why I do it.
Yeah. So I guess were there any like childhood interests or events that like shaped your understanding of things like human nature and psychology, which seems to be like a pretty big part of your platform?
I think the reason it's a big part of my platform is because I understood it so little growing up. I didn't have a lot of friends. I think my parents were not very social. And I would say, I often say that my childhood was very underexposed. And I didn't have any siblings either, so I was that classic kind of like socially awkward only child, right? And I think in many ways, it's funny because I think my lack of understanding of people and my lack of comfort around people probably held me back in life more than anything else. And I think the better I have become at understanding people, the further my life has progressed. Like every life has its bottlenecks. And, for better or for worse, my bottleneck was not material resources. My parents were pretty comfortable, but my bottleneck was more, I guess, my own beliefs about what I could do in the world and my ambitions and my expectations of myself, and then also just my ability to go out and create opportunity. And almost always I've found when people who kind of create opportunities out of thin air, they do it through the vector of knowing how to be opportunistic, to be in the right place in the right time, to know a very broad set of people and kind of like pull them together, pull those connections together at the right time. That's
Yeah.
my goal. I don't know if I'm there yet.
No, yeah, that makes sense. And I guess like more specifically, I noticed you went very viral on a post about like rating men's dating profiles, and that caused I saw a lot of like controversy that they may have caused. So I guess like could you tell me more about that experience, specifically like the potential upsides, but also the downsides of going really viral on social media?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, no, I wouldn't say that was a super viral post. It did go. I've had like two or three posts reach similar levels of whatever. Going viral is a very interesting experience because what happens is they say like it breaks containment, where you have normally a set of people who read your work and enjoy it, and they know who you are and kind of where you come from. So they interpret things the right way. Usually when things go viral, it's because a lot of people who are not familiar with your work see it and there's something in it that they misunderstand it, and then it triggers them. And usually sometimes it's even on purpose, like the phrasing is there to be deliberately a little bit controversial, a little bit misunderstood. That wasn't one of them. I honestly just made a kind of flippant remark being like, this guy's profile is awful. I know he says that he doesn't get a lot of dates. He was complaining about, being on Tinder for 2 years or whatever and what a horrible experience it was. And I was just like, okay, well, this is not, it's very unfortunate, but this is not, I can see why that's the case. And you might be a lovely person, but you would never know it based on what this profile says. And then I think it went viral because people just like the gal of I quoted like, oh, just pay me $100 and I'll tell you how to fix it. And I think people just like the gal of me saying, uh, that my opinion was worth that much money. But I did have like 12, 15, I've lost count, but a bunch of people message me and pay me and ask, and one
Really?
of them got his first match in over a year because of like directly because of advice I gave him. So that felt pretty good. And I met some very lovely people, and I think they found my advice very helpful. They were happy with it, but it wasn't like like a grand is not a lot of money, so I wouldn't say it was like life changing, but it was an interesting experience.
Oh, I see. Because I thought it was just like I thought it was just kind of a joke or like just something
It
like
was
just
a
a
joke.
little bit funny. I didn't know
Yeah.
it like actually turned into a thing.
It was a joke to begin with, but a lot of people didn't think it was one. And then some people were just like, "Hey, are you doing this for real? And I was like, well, I can.
Mm, yeah. So I guess you also work in AI, right?
I want to. I wouldn't say that I specifically do at the moment.
Okay, yeah. No, yeah, but I guess how would you balance some of like the tech parts of your work life with the social media parts? And like how would you say like your projects kind of intersect with your writing on like Substack and Twitter?
When I figure it out, I'll tell you. To be honest, I don't really have a great system for it yet. I've been recently trying this thing like cyclical living, where I give myself just 2 days out of every week completely. Like, I give myself permission to not think about or worry about anything else and just do content. I did that for the first time this week, and I think it went really well. And for the rest of the week, I've been able to not stress about content and just purely stress about other things. And I think that creating that separation has been very good.
I guess I had another question about like, because when I started doing these podcasts, I thought it would just be like I would just click record and start talking and then post it and it would all be fine. But then I realized that there's like a lot of logistical stuff that kind of makes up 99% of the work. So it's like emailing,
Yeah.
setting up things, making like logos and stuff. So I guess did you sort of expect that when you started to post a lot? And like, do you experience a lot of like little like technical problems that kind of overcorrect for like the actual writing and the actual talking?
So, funnily enough, I wanted to start a podcast at one point. I thought it aligned really well with what I wanted to do, which is again, it would like the thing is you record one podcast, if you probably get like 6 or 7 material for really good shorts and that alone, right? But I think it really was the technical issues that got to me. I am, quite frankly, in many ways, tremendously lazy. And a lot of my flows in work is avoiding these technical issues as much as I can. So I can just record and get it out there. So for that reason, I've experimented with many different video formats that involve using a nicer camera, kind of stock footage, animations, whatever. And in the end, I just find that the pain of transferring over footage and properly editing and it's just too much. So these days, I just and people seem to enjoy it. Like it's a format that clearly works. Just kind of record within the TikTok app and then download the video and post it other places. And I use Dropbox to sync up the foot to just sync up finished videos. But I really agree with you. I think people who don't have never tried content creation think it's easy. It's not. Even the super simple version that I do is a lot of work. So yeah, it's. I wish I had a better answer. I just avoid it as much as possible.
No, yeah, I agree with you. I think TikTok though is like, yeah, you're right. It's they made it way easier to just kind of like produce
Mm,
content because you can just hit record
yeah.
and like it's kind of easy to like edit and stuff. Cause
They do auto captions too, which is great. Yeah.
yeah. So I guess like what's kind of like your main platform or like the thing that you would like if you think of something really cool, where would you go first to post it?
Everything I do, I post everywhere except for text. So if I have a video, I repost it onto Instagram, I post it onto YouTube, I post it onto like Twitter as well. But I'd say Twitter is my main platform, but in terms of it's not the one that gives me the most growth. So I'd say that I wouldn't normally say TikTok, but I've actually been getting really, really good growth with Instagram. More than I expected because I've had a few friends who struggled to grow on Instagram before and they told me TikTok was much better, but yeah, probably Instagram and TikTok. YouTube is very
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah, YouTube is hard. I did YouTube when I was way younger. And like
Yeah,
it was actually yeah, I had like a YouTube channel. I'd make like gaming videos and like vlogs and stuff.
that's awesome.
But I think it's kind of shifted towards like TikTok and Instagram being the main places to go viral because people just like scroll through reels and like short clips and it just comes up rather than watching videos.
I've noticed that YouTube's short reels algorithm is trash. Like I go on there and I don't see these days all I see is just I mean, I know YouTube in general is not designed for that kind of content, but all I see is just like clip farms of different movies and TV shows and just I think that YouTube is starting to become the Substack of the YouTube of like the video world where people go on there like the long form quality of videos are tremendously high quality and that's probably going to become their niche going forward. I also know that I think YouTube rewards that much more. For example, if you have these long form videos, they will push it and push it over time. And I think, in fact, how much reach you get in the algorithm is a function of, I might be wrong about this, but I'm under the impression that it's a function of how much total video time you've posted. So, like, 1 half-hour video is going to get you further than like 4 shorts. And
Mhm.
that's probably part of the reason why I have not been doing very well. But yeah.
No, yeah. So would you say you like kind of just like typing up on your computer and then hitting post, or do you, I guess like I know like recording comes with a lot of logistics, but like pure in the pure form of just like recording yourself versus like typing and posting, which one would you say you like more?
Oh, recording makes me tremendously uncomfortable. I hate doing it. I've always hated doing it. I will continue to hate doing it. I love writing though. So I think making videos, especially with my face in them, has been a mean to the has always been like a means to an end. I'd probably feel differently about it if I was a talented video editor, because I know video editing is an art form in and of itself, and I love anything creative. But unfortunately, I think we do live in an era where if you want maximum reach, you kind of have to get your face out there and start yapping. So,
No,
yeah.
yeah, I agree with you. I think video editing is a type of art because I used to be really interested in just like editing videos for people and just like taking recordings and like putting cool effects on it, etc., clipping different things. And I realized that it's like it's its own thing, kind of
It's a super
independent of
valuable
like
skill.
recording.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
I think a lot of the most successful, I remember when I was getting started, I was looking into a lot of I would spend time looking at these channels that I enjoyed and trying to deconstruct, oh, how did this person get into it? You know, how did they discover their secret sauce or whatever? And I remember realizing that a lot of, I personally, by the way, would never watch my own videos. Not that I think they're bad exactly, it's just not what I want. You know, if I want to hear someone yapping, I'll call my cousin. I like going on YouTube and I like going on TikTok for these very beautifully edited cinematic type things, you know? And so I started out wanting to do that and I failed miserably because video editing is hard. And I realized a lot of people who kind of go right off the bat doing beautifully edited footage, like these are people who were hobbyist video editors before they ever started content creation. So they were taking something they already enjoyed and were just kind of publishing it. And I really wish that was a skill I had picked up when I was younger because then I don't know, it would I think I would in at some point I will take some time off and properly learn how to edit videos. But yeah.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned earlier that like originally when you started posting, you would be like, oh, I want this to go viral. I want this to get like this many amount of likes, etc. But then you kind of like stopped trying to make it viral. And then that's when things really kicked off. So I guess like how did that change in mindset kind of affect your production?
So there's some nuance there. So with Twitter, I stopped completely. With TikTok, I do very much still think about virality because I think that it's easier to kind of crack down a form. With Twitter, I think there's much less of a formula for what can go viral. I also think that when you're trying to go viral, you tend to become a little more controversial. You tend to pander to certain things of it. In fact, I have a friend of mine who I met off of Twitter who told me in my most recent tweet to SF, him and all of his friends, by the way, at one point had followed me and then muted me around the same time that I started trying to go viral. Like we were like I don't think they objected to me necessarily, but it was just like in their words, following you made our timeline slop. And that was because I was eliciting a very specific type of engagement, which they did not want, you know, I guess on their timelines. Like they were here for kind of nuanced, high quality thoughts, not engagement bait. And I respect that. I think that makes a lot of sense. But with TikTok, especially, there are a lot of things you can do to maximize a video's chance of going viral. It's still an art, not a science. Sometimes a video goes viral that I put absolutely no thought into. But yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the reason I kind of started this project was to combat like the rise in online hate and like anti-Indian sentiment, especially on things like Twitter and TikTok and just like memes that get overlooked and just kind of like
Mm.
accepted and normalized. So I guess like do you have sort of like a relation to some of the events that's been happening online related to like anti-Indianness and like how do you kind of like deal with it and crowd it out to like focus just on like what you want to do?
Truth be told, I mean, I get my fair share of it as well, especially when I talk about, I think especially when a post does go viral, people, especially if it's related to dating or whatever, people don't like what I like to say. My race is an easy target. My gender is also an easy target. I honestly don't give a shit. I understand. I think I really understand what you mean about it being a worrying larger trend. But for me specifically, I think you should not get into content creation unless you have very thick skin. It's to me, it's just another cheap shot. I don't see it as any different from the cheap shots people take about other things. I just, to tell you the truth, I think my technique for, and I'm not minimizing how it gets. Like, I think it can get very nasty. I know it causes a lot of people a lot of, I think, distress. And luckily, I have never kind of gotten this in any kind of serious way. You know, like I've never really elicited, for example, like the disapproval or like the hatred of people I've respected. It's always just been like these anon accounts who have nothing better to do than take cheap shots. And I think that the way I always kind of tell myself this is that I really do think of everything social media as a simulation, right? Occasionally I will meet a great friend and then I give them my number and then like it becomes a real friendship. But then it's apart from that, it's literally like a simulation, you know? Like you try a thing, it works, you do a thing, it doesn't work. All these people are basically bots, they're NPCs. And the way, and I think this might be a bit controversial, but the way I really keep my sanity is by developing a healthy dose of contempt for anyone who even thinks about me enough to post an ugly comment. Like, I think that if you, I once wrote this, okay, so I once wrote this thread that I wish every beginner content creator would read, you included. And it's basically about the way that content creation screwed your head. And it was inspired by this one content creator called Clara Dow, whose entire channel was about body positivity. Then she went and got plastic surgery, and her whole channel turned on her for it. And now, to this day, I think it's been several months. Every tweet is just her trying to like she's trying to like win that love back in one way or in another, right? And it's not going to work, obviously. Like that's a move that is going to completely alienate your audience, no matter what you are, no matter what you do. But the problem is that she got too attached to the way they saw her, and that's the trap you really have to escape, right? The people around me are real. The people whom I'm friends with are real, and I think their opinion of me always has to take so much precedence in my mind. And effectively, you have to develop a healthy dose of contempt, not only for your haters, but also for your fans, because they're like a flip side of the same coin, right? People who either adore you or hate you without knowing you are not like that adoration and that hatred, both of those things mean nothing. And you can't value one without coming to value the other, if that makes any sense. Like it's the positivity and the
And
negativity.
it's like still
Yeah.
engagement with your content.
Yeah, yeah, that's the way. That's also, it's just like in my head, like someone says something retarded and it's like, oh, thank you for the engagement, sir. Move on, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I think I saw that post you made about like the YouTuber who, yeah, she got
Oh.
surgery after like a lot of body positivity stuff. So would you say that like, or in terms of like your analysis, would you say that like her decision to do that was because she cared so much about what they thought, or like was it something else?
I don't know if the Oh, this is a tangential conversation. I don't think the plastic surgery was because she cared what her followers thought necessarily. I think that she had an insecurity. I mean, her whole channel was always about her insecurity. So she probably had this insecurity going in. And the problem is that instead of just letting it go, she decided she was going to fixate on it. And having fixated on it, decided to make it her whole platform. And the problem is that when you kind of she kind of boxed herself into an identity online and in thinking about it so much also in real life, and her excuse was that, oh, you know, I'm still about the body positivity, I just outgrew that, you know, specific part of it, which I think is, yeah, that's a completely separate conversation and I'm happy to have it. I don't know if it's topical
No,
to your
yeah, no,
podcast,
yes.
but yeah, yes, I don't think I think that it was not the audience that drove her mad, but I think it certainly didn't help. And I also think that she lost all sense of detachment with her audience to the point where I don't necessarily fault her for getting plastic surgery if that's what she really wanted, but she should have been able to accept that the price of this plastic surgery is going to be alienating my audience. But the fact that she couldn't bring herself to do that and she couldn't accept that it was a trade-off, I think, is what part of what drove her nuts. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess like the my audience part. So do you sort of feel like you have like a community of people who kind of like know you pretty well, like in terms of like your online presence and like engage with you normally, and like every post you like expect certain people to like kind of like it and comment on it, or would you say it's more like anyone kind of just sees your posts?
I think when I was smaller, there was like a sweet spot of around honestly 200-ish followers when I had a very set group of accounts that I would recognize and that would interact with me often. These days, it's just, I still recognize a few names, but for the most part, it's just random engagement. However, I do have a few mutuals whom I would consider at this point to be very real friends. And yeah, yeah, pretty much.
No, yeah. No, yeah, it's always nice to hear kind of like the like mindset behind content creators and sort of like more than just like what they post and sort of how they feel about it and how they feel about like the work they do. So it's like
Thank
a
you.
really cool perspective. I guess like transitioning, how would you describe your like college experience at Northeastern, and like how did that sort of influence your career?
Probably should have influenced my career more, to be honest. I did not, I'm afraid to say that for most of my life, I did not take academics seriously at all. And I started to try to take it seriously during college, but unfortunately, there's very much a skill that goes into getting good grades. It's a skill in and of itself, completely separate from learning the material. And I never think, and I used to tell myself, if I've learned the material, do I need to do the grades matter? And yes, well, clearly, very much they do for completely different reasons. And I think, unfortunately, that this kind of goes back to what I was talking about growing socially isolated. I would say the most valuable part of university is unironically the connections and the friends you can make there, more than the grades you get. It's the chance to work on certain projects, it's the very special status you get in the workforce as an intern. You basically have a protected job pool just for you. And none of those things were things I really took advantage of. I think I had a very, it's
Oh,
a
like is
very
it like the co-op stuff or
it's the co-op stuff for sure. It's also that was unique to Northeastern. It's one of the reasons I joined up. I didn't even end up taking advantage of it, unfortunately. I was in a rush to graduate for whatever reason. But yeah, I think that for me, this goes back to what I was saying about growing up socially isolated, where I had an attitude that I think is probably pretty common. I've seen it in a lot of people, and I know how I wish I could convince them to stop thinking that way, but I know I can't, so I don't bother. But it's just this idea that this disenchantment with the larger world in general, where you think that joining clubs is a waste of time, you think that networking is a waste of time, like you think of it as just like this clownish thing that people do because they feel like they have to, but in reality, you can just sit by yourself. They're like, why would you show up to class if you're smart enough that you can just sit by yourself and learn the material, you know? And that was probably one of the most arrogant and damaging attitudes I had, especially during university, where, if you want to sit at home and learn things, you can do that. You don't have to go to school. You can, MIT, Stanford, many very prestigious universities release most of their material online for free. And I don't know, it's a my point is, there's a lot of regret about my university experience. The fact that it was during COVID certainly didn't help. The
Mm.
fact that I was in a long distance relationship that I prioritized above everything else, much to my detriment, also did not help. And yeah, I basically made a lot of mistakes during that time.
So were you at like your home, like in your hometown, just online, or were you on campus during COVID?
I was not on campus. I actually lived with my, at the time, boyfriend. Yes.
I see. So I guess your experience was sort of characterized by like wanting to just like learn things independently and not fully taking advantage of like the connections you can make.
I think my experience was characterized by me thinking it was some kind of flex to put in as little effort as possible and get out as much as you could.
Mm.
And to also thinking it was kind of a flex to stay to stay at home with my boyfriend and think that we were a very superior, very clever pair for putting in as little effort as possible as compared to other people who were trying so hard. Like it was. The more I talk about it, the more horrific it seems and the more stupid it seems. And I regret every second I spent thinking that way. But unfortunately, that was my attitude during a very formative time. So, yeah, very glad I
Mm.
broke out of it in the end, learned some humility, learned the value of things. A little bit too late, but it's never too late, right?
Yeah. So I'm just curious about this. So when you post about like relationship things and like sort of like how one should act and like sort of like
Yeah.
dynamics and stuff, do you take from your own experience, like i.e. like with your boyfriend when you were at Northeastern, or like is it just like top level things you like observe and just think
It's
about?
It's both. I would like to say I don't think I try very hard. I like to say I'm an amoral person. I try very hard for my content to not be preachy. Some people still think it's preachy just because they don't like my tone. But other people I've heard plenty of people say that they don't find it preachy because I don't think I've never advocated for somebody to act in one way versus another. In my mind, every life path is valid. I just try to point out cause and effect. It's like, hey, I've noticed that when you do this, it incentivizes this. And I think there are people who wouldn't mind incentivizing that. I think, for example, when I say, hey, this incentivizes people to be, like, I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head, but yeah, I mean, everyone has different priors. Everyone has different priorities. I don't judge anyone's priorities, but I do think you can observe cause and effect and be like, hey, I think in many cases, for a lot of my life, I did things without realizing what I was incentivizing or what I was actually creating in my life. And I think that's what I maybe try to help people avoid. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's less about like you should be like this, you should think like this, more of like, oh, when people act this certain way, this thing happens. And that's just my
Yeah.
observation.
Yes, but like it doesn't have to be you might even want that thing to happen. Like I'm not here assuming you do or don't. And part of it is from my life. A lot of it is observation.
Mhm.
I enjoy just talking to people. I enjoy hearing about their lives and their regrets and just noticing patterns in the way that people think and the way their lives go. And yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess what'd you major in when you were in college?
I did a dual major in computer engineering and computer science. So,
Yeah.
which was not that bad because even though it was two different schools, a lot of the coursework does overlap.
So I guess what outlet of creativity would you sort of default to when you have free time? Would it be like coding and making projects, or is it more of the content creation stuff?
Now or when I was in university?
Just like tomorrow morning.
Oh, yes. Probably honestly, I think I need a bit more of a creative outlet at this point. Writing, almost certainly. I think my most creative endeavor these days are my Substacks. I really enjoy them. I also write short stories when I have the free time. I'm working on a novel, but I do miss a lot of the creative outlets I used to have. I used to love music. I used to love cooking. I used to love a lot of things that art, especially, that these days I don't necessarily have time for. But yeah,
Yeah. So you said you're working on a novel.
yes.
That's so have you been sort of like promoting that and like talking
I'll
about it, or
promote
is
it
it
when
going to be
it's
like a
done. Promote it when it's done. I think it's dangerous to discuss things that are in progress because you'll find often that talking about them is more fun than doing them. I've also fallen into that trap in the past, but no, it's a pretty
then people might be like, oh, like drop the novel or something or
it's not about what they say. It's just more that when you start to do a lot, you'll find that when you take on these like big projects, about half the time you realize they're going nowhere and drop them, and then you sound very stupid to people where you talked about them a lot. And even then, like the very act of talking about it, like I think there's some science about it and the dopamine in your brain where you get like this dopamine hit just by talking about how you're going to do a thing. And then that actually detracts from the dopamine reserves that are actually meant to fuel the efforts you put towards it. Like it's a cheap hit of dopamine, basically. It's like a cheap
Mhm.
outlet in the same way scrolling is a cheap outlet and keeps you from getting to work, and gaming is a cheap outlet and keeps you from getting to work. Yeah.
I see. So like if you talk about something you're gonna do, it kind of makes you feel like you've done a bit of it already and then you feel
Yeah.
satisfied and that's bad.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
see.
Yeah.
That's a cool perspective. So do you say like you try to stay humble when like you're talking about your work in conversations?
I try to not talk about my work in conversations. I think
Oh,
I probably end up talking about it a lot anyway, but because it's just always on my mind, and sometimes, especially when I'm tired, I'm kind of like worried about something, it tends to come out. But ideally, I don't talk about my work at all. I think it benefits me very little too, except in the very rare case when I'm talking about someone who's doing the same thing as me. And then there's a lot to learn there and it's mutually interesting. But I try to avoid talking about my work to people who don't do it, who are not doing something similar. Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. I guess this is kind of just like a like question about like current events. So GPT-5 came out this morning, and since you like kind of work in like CS and stuff and do a lot of that, do you have any like thoughts or predictions on how AI might affect how like work gets done, specifically like content work and also just like projects?
Oh, I spent the whole weekend talking about this with people in SF, or all of last week. So I think people are very overexcited about generative AI. As a, and I don't mean that like, I think I'm using generative AI more colloquially than I am the literal definition of it as a field. I'm not dismissing the field. I'm more dismissing the idea that people think you can just get AI to write for you, to come up with ideas for you. I think you can do that. I think it will always be recognizable and also kind of subpar. Of course, there's really amazing things being done with Gen AI in like animation and video editing. I don't mean to like dismiss that, but I think specifically as time goes on, I like to think of AI right now as just being a very capable, still fallible, but very capable intern. And you can definitely use it to streamline a lot of things. I've also been experimenting with the ability of AI to there's a lot of dumb work that goes into content creation, even with the writing bit. Stuff like, for example, if you want to grow maximally on a platform, you want to comment as much as you can. And commenting is quite frankly dumb work. If you set yourself to writing 60 comments a day, you're basically just like doing, I've noticed a very rote process of refactoring your own content and just like condensing it into a comment that is relevant to the thing. And like it's I don't I know right now there are a lot of very unsophisticated AI comment bots and everyone hates them. I report one every time I see one on my profile, but I think when if you could get a I think that like that's
Oh,
the kind of thing.
you don't like when you get the comments?
The AI ones, yeah, there's some that are very obviously from like AI accounts, and I hate those.
Oh,
But I think as models become more sophisticated and it's easier and easier to train on people's like actual writing, I think that eventually I think I can really imagine and everyone from in like in the same way that entrepreneurs use ghostwriters right now, I can really imagine like what a ghostwriter does is they kind of like talk to you every week. They try to get a sense of who you are and your ideas and like your they read existing corpuses of your work and they're just there kind of like rephrasing a lot of your current ideas and then just like doing the boring work, pushing it out on socials, which you don't have time to do. I can really see AI taking that over as it becomes more sophisticated and as we become better and better at training it on like the existing corpuses of someone's work. But it doesn't, I think people, the idea that like anyone who tries to use AI entirely to as a replacement for their own creativity and their own originality and their own thinking, I think is going nowhere. Yeah.
yeah. So it serves more of like a supplemental, like it's my assistant type of thing, rather
Yes,
than
pretty
like
much.
replacing. Yeah. So I
Pretty much,
guess
yeah.
the comment thing. So you comment. You do you just find things to or comment on, or do you just like scroll through and then see like, oh, I actually have like a genuine thought about this.
I actually try to, it's the second one,
Mm.
but I think there was a very brief time when I was trying to grow where I did every day just kind of like search out things to comment. And it worked amazingly well. Like putting like 60 comments a day made my account grow very quickly because now you're no longer limited by your own organic impressions, right? Like you can kind of get to piggyback off of everyone else's posts and their audience. And it gives you a lot of exposure very quickly. But these days, I don't do it just because it would take up too much of my energy and it's not a priority. Like, I think I'm at a point now where I can just post and grow on my own Steam. So even though I should, I don't, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Yeah, more on like the writing stuff. So I've been doing like a ton of college apps in the past few months and like just writing a
Hmm.
bunch of essays. And every now, I mean, I love to write and I just love to like voice my thoughts and stuff. And I do a lot of things to make it easier. But like, I guess sometimes I'll freeze or I'll go blank and I'll not know what the next sentence should be. And I'll kind of just be stuck there for 30 minutes. So I guess as someone who like, a lot of what you do is just writing. So I guess, do you ever feel that way where you just don't know what to say? And how do you kind of like deal with that?
Oh, I experienced that for the first time in a long time when I got back to writing essays for the first time in many years. Yeah, it's not, I don't really experience that as much when I'm writing stories and stuff because I think I come into it with a sort of idea fully formed. And then usually there's like a current of emotion that carries me through, right? But yeah, for essays, I think I have this. I don't do outlines and stuff. What I do is I usually have a lot of very disparate ideas and disparate kind of like impressions that I feel are vaguely connected. And I kind of just like try to put them all down in a very messy way. And then there's a significant amount of time that's spent organizing it and creating kind of like a common flow and just making it showing why these things are actually cohesive even if they don't seem like it, and that's been a really big upward like I think I always thought of myself as a good writer and it was shocking how difficult writing essays was until I got used to it. But yeah, honestly I would say that when you're really suffering from writer's block the best thing to do is probably just go take a walk without headphones, without anything, and just let yourself just mull over it in your subconscious, or go hang out with your friends. Just, yeah, let your brain fill up with some new impressions and then come back to it the next morning, and you'll find usually that the way forward has become a bit more clear.
Yeah, no, yeah, I agree with you. Sometimes just taking a break and then coming back in with that like wave of emotion that kind of influences what you say definitely works out well. I guess like if you were to have a conversation with your 16-year-old self or your 17-year-old self, what would be like the main piece of advice you'd give?
Oh my God. Honestly, probably to oh, what this is there's that girl was an idiot. There is so much to there's so much to unpack there. You know what I probably would say is, you know what? In hindsight, I would tell her to take a gap year from school, or at least a gap semester from school, and live on her own in a big city and just get live on her own in like a big city and just try to try living life in a way that's a bit unstructured for once. I
Yeah, like
think
spontaneous life.
I wouldn't say spontaneous so much. I think that I also fell into this trap where when I started university, I didn't really have a dedicated interest in computer science. I had a lot of energy, not a lot of commitment, not a lot of direction. And it's just the thing about school and even work is that you can be very useless and still feel like you're being useful because you're doing this thing that everyone says, oh, that's productive, you know? Even if you're not really learning that much or progressing much as a human being, you yeah, there's like this deceptive veneer of progress that I think is incredibly dangerous because what happens a lot is that you leave school and you realize, fuck, what do I do now? Like you don't actually have any plans or initiative to carry you forward. And I didn't wasn't faced with that, but I think part of the reason I wasn't faced with that is because I took that gap semester and a couple semesters in, and I had the time to kind of really sit down and confront who I was and all of my shortcomings and all of my lack of direction and carve that out for myself. And I think the earlier I did that, I could have done that, the better it would have been. Because yeah, for the first few semesters at school, I don't think I made a good use of my time. And I also think that it would have prevented me from taking the easy way out in many arenas, whether it was to take this thing that I found very challenging, which was my school and my career and my executive function problems and everything. And I just like decided to look away from that and make like a relationship my priority, which was a very stupid move, but it was a form of escapism. And I think it would have kept me from, yes, also to stop talking to that person. Yeah, I don't think he was a good influence on me in any way. So.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I guess like the part you said about like learning who you are, I guess I hear a lot of people say that like, oh, I take time off to learn more about myself. Like, what to you, what does that like really mean in terms of like learning who you are? Is it like learning about the things you really like to do or like your mindsets? And does it involve like a change or more of just like an understanding?
Oh, that's a really good question. Because yeah, people use that term a lot, and very often it's just kind of a bogus term, and I almost regret using it. So thank you for letting me clarify. I think learning who you are, the best way to when people say that, often what they mean is I just spend a lot of time thinking about my feelings. I'm sure that's useful for some people, who, especially ones who habitually repress how they feel. But I think not most people actually don't do that. But I think most people are hurt and are not able to develop a sense of self because of inaction, right? There is no. I think fundamentally identity is not developed in isolation. It is your relationship with other people and what you have, but most fundamentally, what you have to contribute to the world. There's this really great thread by Do at the Do Lab called How to Know What You're Meant to Do in Life. And effectively, the thread is about comparative advantage, right? It's like everyone has something that comes to them very easily that they've always just taken for granted. So they probably don't even realize it's there. But if they knew how to leverage, that would instantly create kind of a natural kind of avenue in life in which they have motivation comes easier and progress comes easier. And for that reason, like they can go very far and kind of carve out a way that they can be useful to the world at large. And I think that's what I mean. I would say when you want to learn who you are, learn your natural limitations and learn what your comparative advantage is. And I think there is an underemphasis these days in schools of just like self well-being and therapy and whatever on the value in work and action. Because I think that from work often comes your most like a very solid and very unshakable sense of self. And I'm not saying that's all you need. Like you don't need to be like a worker drone or a bee, but in general, it's very hard to feel good about yourself if you have nothing to contribute because then your value rests entirely on the opinions of those around you and how much they value you. And that is much more tenuous, I think, than the kind of your own ability. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know you know that's a great piece of advice. And I know you mentioned like kind of how you sometimes feel really lazy and like I kind of agree with you because I have like a lot of inertia to do things, even if it's stuff I really like. So I guess how do you kind of overcome that? How do you like understand like okay, I want to do this work, so I'm just gonna do it.
How do you overcome it?
How do I honestly just procrastinate a little bit and then like I finally just feel like doing it and then I finally do
Yeah,
it.
pretty
But
it's pretty much the same for me.
yeah.
A lot of I wish it was different. I talk a lot about self-discipline. I still have more self-discipline than I did years ago. And I think there are a few techniques I found that helped. One is on the days that I manage to wake up early in the morning, I get more work done than I probably do in like the next 5 days. Because it really helps me to just kind of sit and get to work right away and not give myself the room to start daydreaming or being distracted. And then I tend to like once I actually get start working, I it's especially if it's something that I find interesting, I can do it for like the next 5 hours, no problem. So it's more about kind of like there is I found over time just through trial and error that there are circumstances in which I can work very hard and very well, and there are circumstances in which I can't. And I try to maximize those the first opportunity. But unfortunately, life can be kind of chaotic. My sleep schedule is a constant battle. So yeah, some days I stay up really late, and then the next day is kind of shot, and it's not perfect. I think honestly, learning to forgive myself for the fact that my progress is always going, but accept that progress is inconsistent and not linear, and that showing up every day does not mean being perfect every day. It just means trying to do your best every day. And some days that's going to be 110%, some days that's going to be 20, and just being glad that you at least tried. Yeah, that's helped me. Because I used to get into this very defeatist, all or nothing mindset where I'd be like, oh, today I'm going to turn over my life. And then I'd spend like 5 days giving it, trying to like obey this incredibly demanding schedule of like, oh, I will do study for 5 hours and go to the gym for 2 hours and only eat 1,000 calories and I'm going to turn it all at once. And this is just going to be me, fresh start, rest of my life. That's not how it works. And every time I tried to do that, I would stick to it for like a few days. I would fail, feel like shit about myself, be like, oh, okay, fine, I'll do it later. But
That makes me think
yeah.
about this tweet I saw earlier. I forgot his name, but it was like it's okay to start over, whether that's at like 10 a.m., 2 p.m., 6 p.m., because as long as you're
Mm,
doing something that's still like productive and good.
I really like that. I really like that mentality. Yeah. There is this feeling I've been falling prey to. Thank you for sharing that with me because there's this thing I've been falling prey to these days where if I wake up late in the day, I kind of give up on being productive for that day. But it's true. Like, there's no reason. Oh, I saw this really psychotic video that went viral. The guy was talking about, oh, I'm going to get way ahead of everyone. No one can compete with me. You know why? Because for me, 6 to 12, that's one day. That's one, oh, it's not 6 to 12. What was it? Like he basically like gave himself like 5 hours for sleep and then he split the rest of it into like days where it's like, oh, most people only work like 6 hours a day. So for me, 6 to 12 is one day. And then 12 to 6 is a new day. And then he's just like, yeah, so I'm living 3 days where everyone's just living one. And it's a little bit crazy, but I think the idea is kind of sound in the sense that, yeah, like
Yeah,
pretty much exactly what you were saying.
yeah, you can start. Yeah, you can start over throughout the day and just continue to do things. Yeah, I guess that's kind of how I try to operate because sometimes I'll do nothing till like 5 p.m. and then at 6 p.m. then I'll be like, oh, I need to do this. I need to finish this like essay and then I'll start that.
Hmm.
But I guess like I was hoping we could end our conversation today with like some three rapid fire questions. So I
Let's do
guess
it.
first of all, what's like the craziest thing you've done to like maybe downplay your Indian identity and how do you feel about that now?
I don't think I've ever done anything, honestly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've always been pretty at ease with being Indian. I don't think I've ever played it up. I don't think I've ever played it down either. Yeah.
Yeah. Would you say it's been like a secret superpower ever in your life or career?
I think it's nice because I'm really trying to think about this. Honestly, no, not really. I think coming from a family of engineers is certainly a superpower, but I know engineer is not synonymous with Indian. Even there's a really big cohort of like Indian engineers who come to the States, but yeah, I think it would have been the same if like there's a lot of like white families that do engineering as
Mm.
well. So yeah.
No, yeah, that makes sense. And then I guess last question, if your life had like a soundtrack, what song would be playing during the key moments?
Oh wow. Depends on the moments. My mood fluctuates a lot. Probably, you know what? Okay, I'll tell you the song I would like for it to play, which is probably there's this old Peggy Lee song called "Pass Me By," which I found in the past couple years I end up playing a lot whenever my life is just in upheaval because it's very I don't it's very kind of like optimistic, very playful. It's like I got me 10 fine toes that wiggle in the sand. Like it's very kind of
Oh, I've heard that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know if you've heard it. I first heard it in a show called The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, but Yeah, it just makes me feel very playful about life, and that's how I want to feel.
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree. I agree with you. Again, thank you so much for coming on. You shared some really great perspectives. Yeah, thank you so much.